Recorded at the WNDU 16 News Now studios, this is the South Bend Tribune's Pot of Gold Notre Dame Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, columnist Tom Noy, Notre Dame football beat writer Mike Berardino, and WNDU's Jackson Neal.
We are entering week 4 of the college football season. Where has it gone already? Didn't feel like yesterday we were just sitting here talking about Texas A&M.
It does.
And now it's week 4. That's Mike Berardino. I'm Tom Noy, and the announcer got it wrong because we have somebody new on the show this week. It's Neil Jackson.
Neil Jackson,
ladies and gentlemen. Neil Jackson.
Tell that story.
Yeah, I wish I had it with me. It's actually in my office. It's at Purdue. My seat was Neil Jackson, not Jackson Neal. Yeah, my credential was right, though.
The seating chart listed that in the Purdue press box had all the people listed, and I'm looking down, I'm looking. It says,
who's that?
WNDU, Neil Jackson. So there you go.
I've gotten that before, actually.
Have you really?
Yeah, people think it's Neil Jackson because I guess Jackson's a common last name, so I don't know.
Well, no. We'll call him Jackson Neal. He's our third member of our group here. We're going to set the stage for Notre Dame and Miami. Notre Dame 2-1. They're ranked 18th in the USA Today poll. We are instructed to go with the USA Today poll and not the
coaches. Coaches know more. They say, right?
The coaches know more than the media.
You know, all the
not
coaches
in this room.
All the coaches are filling out that thing, aren't they, Tom? Every week, just meticulously.
I think when as the buses were leaving West Lafayette and driving up State Road 25, Marcus Freeman was in the front seat. Now we were told last night, we learned Al Golden graded the film on the way home, on the bus ride home. He was grading the film in his seat, and I believe Marcus Freeman was filling out his coach's poll in his seat. So,
absolutely.
Notre Dame is number 18. They're 2-1. Miami, Ohio. We were told the correct way to reference Miami this week, not Miami of Ohio or the whatever it is.
University of Miami, not that.
University of Miami.
That's not
They're
that.
It's Miami University.
They've lost to Northwestern. They've lost to Cincinnati. Chuck Martin, the return of the former offensive coordinator. I was not on the beat. Obviously, Jackson nor Neil were on the beat when Chuck Martin was here. Were you on the beat?
No,
when Chuck
I missed Chuck Martin, but you hear
Chuck
good
Martin's
things.
supposed to be this great guy.
He's pretty funny at those press conferences, and he lit up Alabama recently for stealing their kicker.
I did see that. I did see
Graham Nicholson, right?
So we are sitting here on Wednesday afternoon. There is no breaking news, knock on wood, the last couple of days to speak of, though there are some depth chart changes because of the amount of injuries. The injuries are mounting. Notre Dame lost 3 guys for varying stretches on Saturday. Jordan Botello, he will be out for the season with a knee injury. He was carted off for Ross-Ade Stadium. Ashton Craig, there was hope on Saturday and Sunday that Ashton Craig's knee injury was not serious, that he may be down a couple of weeks. But Marcus Freeman said on Monday that Ashton Craig is gone for the year. And Billy Strauss suffered what is a high ankle sprain?
They didn't say the high, but it sure looked high. It was one of those walking boots.
He was also carted back before he returned to the sideline on crutches, so it may be a couple of weeks with Billy Strauss. So Botello gone, Ashton Craig gone, Billy Strauss gone for a couple of weeks. In those places, Jordan Botello's spot at the Viper will be manned by one Boubacar Traore, which Mike Berardino wrote about for today's South Bend Tribune. Right guard will be Rocco Spindler in place of in place of Billy Strauss, and at center, Pat Coogan, who I am writing about for Friday, who was the starting left guard, the only returning member of the offensive line to have started a game, that started every game last year.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And he loses his job to Sam Pendleton.
Challenge everything, Tom.
Challenge everything.
Always enhancing.
So, was not happy about that. Did keep a positive attitude. I'm writing about Pat Coogan in Friday's South Bend Tribune. So those are the injuries. Those are the depth chart situations. As we talked about the polls, Notre Dame is at 17 and 18. And now the $10,000 question, one that Marcus Freeman had no business wanting to answer.
Did not want to.
On Monday. About as short as Marcus Freeman has been after a 66-7 win. How does Notre Dame handle success, gentlemen?
Well, didn't Marcus only give like 5 words in that answer?
He gave 3 answers.
Three? Okay.
Preparation.
I remember preparation.
Mindset. Mentality.
Yep.
And that was it. That was almost like his way of saying, I'm tired of talking about this. Don't ask me about it. I'm not going to answer it. Preparation, mindset, mentality. That's how we handle success. Okay.
Feels pretty simple. I mean, it kind of comes down to that. It's there's not really much more to add off of that, I guess. Just the preparation. I think just treating every opponent like when they have to treat seriously. I guess that's kind of what he's been saying.
You say it's pretty simple, but Mike Berardino, you've been around this program too long. There's nothing simple about going into back and playing another MAC school for the second time in 3 weeks.
The proximity of the challenge, those two should be helpful. It's so recent a memory. They obviously, as a program, the institutional memory, even though a number of guys were there for the Marshall loss, some had played for in the Marshall loss, that had been forgotten or wasn't conveyed to those who were new. This is so recent. In fact, coming off the field at Purdue up 42-0 at halftime, pretty good indicator, and that's something that Marcus said after the game and said again on Monday, was very pleased with the way they kept the intensity even as they rotated in. There were just a couple of lapses. They did let the shutout get away. 24-7 was the second half. Purdue's awful.
You're getting ahead of yourself. Irish Rewind, that's next segment. Talk to me about Miami.
We were told that Purdue was a threat to some extent.
Who said that?
Sam King said that. But
get Sam King on line 1.
Yeah, let's call him up again.
And he knows football, but no, that was a dreadful. Anyway, I'll rewind. And so what were we talking about? Yeah, it was so recent that the Northern Illinois thing happened, and Northern Illinois is better than we realized. Miami of Ohio is the defending MAC champions, but other than that, in the 11 years of Chuck Martin now, it's been pretty middling.
Yeah.
Been pretty average, and they do have a 24-year-old quarterback, but in the
sixth-year quarterback,
sixth year, their version of, although he did not transfer, he's been there the whole time. This is a real unicorn. In the latest Gabbard, this is Brett. I have to write that. This is Brett Gabbard.
It is not Blaine.
I remember Blaine and Missouri. Where's Austin when we need him? But.
This is not the high school pod.
No, yeah, that's Mondays.
No, he could talk about Mizzou. And this Gabbard's pretty good, but they have no running game, Tom. They're the worst rushing attack by 20. If you think Florida State can't run the ball, they're averaging, Florida State's at 52 yards a game. This Miami of Ohio is at 32. And I realize they just look to pass first, but I'm pretty sure this is the reigning pass efficiency defense leader from last year. And they've rotated in with new people to augment, and it's still very good.
Miami is averaging a paltry. Would it be paltry or an anemic? 1.4 yards per carry.
That's bad.
In the rushing game.
1.42. Dead last at 134. Their FBS team.
Their leading rusher, Jordan Brunson, has carried 8 times for a total of 33 yards. And of those 33 yards, his longest is 15. So he's got basically 7 carries for 18 yards. No, for 19 yards. Doing the math here.
There you go.
Live math.
They told me there was not going to be any math. So run the ball, probably not. Throw the ball, can Brett Gabbert be like Ethan Hansen and just play out of his Hampton and play out of his mind and have a chance? Because that's the only way that Miami has a chance on Saturday. But then again, we sat here 2 weeks ago and said we basically didn't even talk about Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
When it came time to preview Northern Illinois, we talked to Tom Lemming. That's how much we thought of Northern Illinois. So who knows what we're going to see on Saturday again with this team. It's simple. It should be simple. It should be easy. It should be basic. It should be quick. Who knows with Notre Dame?
Yeah. I mean, the one silver line I would say is that those running stats is in that game against Northern Illinois, Notre Dame gave up 190 yards rushing. That was my biggest takeaway from that game. So at least for Miami of Ohio, the worst rushing team in the country. So it'll be different than NIU.
Notre Dame leads the all-time series against Miami, Ohio, 2-0. The first meeting, none of us were there.
You weren't? No?
1909, Notre Dame 46, Miami nothing. The last meeting, 2017. I believe I was there. That was my first year back as columnist, so I don't remember this game. Notre Dame 52, Miami 17.
It's it's a proud program at Miami, cradle of coaches, and when you think about all that went through there, Parsegian, and
Watch how you say
of course Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler. When I got to North Carolina, Dick Crum was the head coach. You remember Dick Crum? Now you weren't alive.
You're directing that comment toward
just for fun, just for giggles.
I know Sean McVay. He's Miami of
giggles.
Ohio. So
did he? Okay.
Yeah.
It's cradle of coaches, amazing.
Yeah,
right? You got me. See, update.
That's my generation.
Jackson here's Dick Crum.
Dick Crum coached Lawrence Taylor. You know Lawrence Taylor?
I've heard of LT.
Best
Yes.
defensive player ever. Still, I'd say Aaron Donald, very good. I go LT, but so Miami through the years. They used to be until the 60s. It was considered little All-American, and then they became in the MAC, and they've knocked off a number of teams over the years. All the MAC seems to be dangerous, as Notre Dame realized with its first ever loss to a MAC team. I just don't see it happening this week, and then I have to agree with Tom that you can't say anything with complete certainty when it comes to college football in general. When it comes to Notre Dame, I don't think Notre Dame's unique in that regard. And when it comes to these mid-major versus the big boys, because with the portal, with the NIL, by the way, NIL is a huge distraction, not necessarily here, but within team dynamics, we're seeing that has to be week to week, just like, am I making enough? Why is he making more? Yes. So, I mean, just the gathering of information that has nothing to do with doing your job on Saturday, but it has to be just the opportunities just flying past you. Should I grab that one? What about that one? Do I want to work for a donut shop on the side? Do an Instagram for them? And I would, but that's modern college football. It cannot be overstated how much social media and the modern dynamic make upsets more possible than ever. To say nothing of the fact that with the portal, with transfers, with the COVID extra year, the talent gap has been shrinking.
I'm going to ask this and then duck. What's the biggest concern if you're Notre Dame this weekend? I'm ducking.
Neil?
I think, it's Brett Gabbert just throwing all over you.
No, it's not. You flunked the test.
I flunked the test? What's the test?
The biggest concern if you're
what's
a Notre Dame
what's the
fan,
answer?
Injury.
It's Riley Leonard. That's all we've heard about all week. Notre Dame wins a game 66-7, and the people still want a quarterback change.
They certainly are intrigued by it. I don't know that they're demanding it.
They're
to
demanding
a majority,
it.
but we'll have to do that as a poll. But you definitely got the sense from Mike Denbrock that they're not looking to put any pressure on Riley Leonard. The whole message was, how did he get things back in line? And I wrote about that off the game at Purdue, that they kind of just had to spend the week building him back up with his confidence after the Northern Illinois thing, reminding him that it's just fine if he's really good at running, which he is. It's just fine to do that. But there was a comment from Mike Denbrock on Tuesday night that really stood out, essentially that Riley knows better than anyone that in order to get to be the offensive unit that they need to be, that they want to be, they're going to have to be more efficient throwing the ball. The mistake they made perhaps against Northern Illinois was to treat it like a controlled scrimmage until they're like, and then even then the throwing wasn't there. If they could build a big lead here, you'd like to see, if they could do that, you'd like to see Riley Leonard, again, stay in the game, throw downfield some more, and see if he can get that chemistry with some of the guys like K.K. Smith, who seems to be on the verge of breaking a deep one.
No, he's not.
Yeah, he is. That's Denbrock loves the guy's speed. Chris Mitchell has had the opportunity.
That's my guy.
Yeah.
That's
Chris Mitchell.
One of my 4 to watch this week is Chris Mitchell. Like, where has Chris Mitchell been?
Yeah, well, he needs to do it soon because they got KK on deck. And
he's warming up.
He can take the top off that defense too.
But wasn't Chris Mitchell the guy that was going to take the top off the defense?
He was, but he's not precise enough. He comes from a Florida International program with no pressure, no fans, no quarterback. He had a better quarterback when he was in high school in Jacksonville, and Carson Beck now at Georgia. And I've written about that. But this is really Carson Beck still by far the best quarterback he's ever played with passing-wise. And you got to be on the same page. And if you don't know, if your quarterback here isn't precise enough, then maybe the windows have to be bigger. And that requires precision from a receiver. And that's why they're just out of sync. Haven't had Jordan Faison either. They're supposed to get Jordan Faison back this week in the slot. A nice, precise weapon there with great hands. Mitchell Evans coming back last week was helpful. You saw that with some big third downs. Didn't get in the end zone, which was my hot take for last week, but 2 other tight ends did.
Jackson, let's put a bow on this Riley Leonard talk. He is 49 of 76 passing, has the 2 picks, 433 yards, still no touchdown passes. Would Riley Leonard be a better passer if he didn't rely so much on the run game? Like knowing that he's able to just tuck it and go. Maybe he doesn't stay in the pocket as long as he wants or as long as he should. Maybe he doesn't look for his second or third option as a wide receiver because he's like, all right, this guy's not open. All right, this guy, I'm just going to go.
Oh, yeah. The legs feel like in some ways a crutch of he knows he can always take it and always either, not only is he athletic enough, but also big enough. He can lower the shoulder even if there isn't a guy. If there's a guy right there at the line of scrimmage, you can still lower the shoulder, pick up 3 yards. He doesn't look for those guys downfield. There was that one screenshot that was kind of going viral on Twitter after the Purdue game of the Riley Leonard outside the pocket. There's
all the people
open downfield.
Your grandma could hit that guy.
Yeah. And I usually don't like those screenshots because it doesn't show the full story. But when there's enough of them, it kind of shows that the eyes aren't downfield. He gets out of the pocket, and the eyes don't stay downfield. It's okay. Let's tuck it and run. And he's such a good runner that you don't want to tell him stop running, but. I mean, some of those have to be hit if you're going to beat really, really good teams, not just a team like Purdue.
How about some Irish rewind?
We can do that.
This is an category for the second week in a row. We have to talk about.
How do you spell that?
I don't know. Spell check that one. Notre Dame 66, Purdue 7. Nobody saw this coming. I think we were sitting there up in the media dining area of Ross-Ade Stadium, and somebody said, rank of the following: a Notre Dame close game, a Notre Dame blowout, a Purdue close win, or a Purdue blowout. And nobody was picking Notre Dame to win by a blowout. They're up 42-0 at halftime. It's 66-7. Everybody who's dressed in shoulder pads and a helmet seemingly gets into that game for Notre Dame. They go 4 quarterbacks deep. All 4 of them play. Steve Angeli throws a couple of touchdown passes. Kenny Minchie has a touchdown. Riley Leonard runs for 100 yards, runs for 3 touchdowns. Notre Dame rolls up over almost 600 yards of offense, and Purdue's just bad. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, they did not look good at all. There was nothing. I liked some Hudson Card throws, but that's kind of where my positive remarks for Purdue kind of stop.
And Riley Leonard, all the talk heading into that game, is he going to be available? Who's going to start? Maybe it's going to be Steve Angeli. Maybe he's not even going to play. Riley Leonard starts. They go down the field on the opening possession, just as they did against Northern Illinois. They score. He runs the ball early. He runs the ball often, and almost kind of just to say, hey, look, my shoulder's fine.
And physically, too. He was dropping the shoulder.
He was.
Almost seeking contact. And I asked him about that after the game, and he's like, listen, I'm not going to play scared. The minute you start to do that, essentially you go half speed, you're going to have a problem. You're inviting disaster. So he's going to be himself. Doesn't mean that style is going to get him all the way through the year. But I'd like to just say too, I mean, it was a good week in terms of the transparency, because generally we're not expecting transparency in the quarterback news flow, but anything that came from Marcus Freeman publicly, from Mike Denbrock publicly, or from a Notre Dame official that I cited on Tuesday, maybe it was one of those day-to-day sort of things, but I was under the impression, and we never came off the idea that it was going to be Leonard available, full go in practice, and they never gave us any reason to doubt that,
never
publicly
straight.
Or privately.
It was right down the middle.
I have to give them credit for that. There was no cat and mouse.
Nope.
They could have totally played cat and mouse and made it really difficult for Purdue to prepare. That's the whole thing that you do you use the news media in every other market and sometimes here to obfuscate, to make the other team have to prepare for more than one quarterback. They didn't do that.
They did not.
So I got to give them credit.
So offensively, there was a lot to like. Obviously, defensively, kind of hard to say because because Purdue's so bad.
Yeah.
But one takeaway I had from West Lafayette walking out of Ross-Ade Stadium, Kennedy Urlacher can just go and smash people. That's the takeaway I took.
Where would he have gotten that ability?
Does it run in a family? Did he watch video of his father do that? But holy cow, he was as soon as he got it, it was like
Bryce Young too.
The Bryce Young on the kickoff.
My.
Bryce Young on the kickoff and Kennedy Urlacher just all over the place, even blowing up Jaden Mickey at one point there in the second half. So it's like, yeah, they're okay with what they have at safety with Xavier Watts and Rod Hurd, who led the team with 4 tackles. He tied with Jason Onye with 4 tackles on Saturday. But
and Adon Schuler,
Kennedy Urlacher, good Lord.
Yeah, he'll. I think we're going to see him in a lot more special teams. I think they only counted 5 special teams reps, but on Pro Football Focus. But Marcus Freeman mentioned it, and Marty Biaggi's eyes lit up when he was asked about, could you don't really have to have your arm twisted to find more ways to use Urlacher on your core 4. We're going to see more of him, and yeah, he's disruptive, no doubt.
All right, to close this out, is Notre Dame really that good, or is Purdue just that bad?
I think Notre Dame is that good. They can be that good on the right day, but it's always the matter of, are they going to show up on that day?
Purdue's the worst team in the Big Ten. That was the idea going into the year. They look like it for sure coming off, but it's still a Big Ten level team. Mm-hmm. We had talked on the show last week about how many transfers they had cycling through, nearly 30 of them. And from big programs, but sometimes there's a reason you're in the portal, and Notre Dame exposed those reasons and did not let off the gas. That's exactly what you want to have coming off an embarrassing home loss to a solid Northern Illinois team. Now, what would the line be? This is a fun one. What would the line be if Northern Illinois played at Purdue? Notre Dame went in there, was favored by 10, and that line was cycling down. It was trickling down to about 8, I think, by the time the game ticked off. At this point, you'd have to install Northern Illinois as 14, 17-point favorite at Purdue until they get this fixed. And so doesn't that kind of, and these are the things that the college football playoff selection committee for snacks and sound bites on Tuesday nights on ESPN, and thanks for the time, and we know you're busy. Those guys and ladies, that's the kind of game that they're going to have to play. And I think that's how I feel right now. It feels like, so that week by week, Notre Dame's embarrassing loss is going to feel a little bit less significant, especially if it does its part all the way up to the USC game.
Let's go to Jackson's favorite part of the show because it makes him feel so young. It's Pot of Old. Yeah, we're not going back to any of those 2 Miami games that we mentioned earlier. Notre Dame 46, Miami nothing.
We're not going back, Tom.
52.
We're not going
Miami
back.
17. We're not talking about that on the Pot of Old.
I'm just saying we're not going back.
We're not going back. We got you.
We are not going back.
We're good.
All right.
We are going back, though, to September 21st, 1996, when number 9 Notre Dame visits number 6 Texas on an afternoon kickoff at Darrell K. Royal Memorial Stadium when it was like about 100 degrees in Central Texas that day in Austin. Notre Dame rolls up 292 rushing yards, 419 total yards. The all-time leading rusher in Notre Dame football history, Autry Denson, runs for 158 yards and a touchdown on 24 carries. And Jim Sanson, there's a name from the past, hits a 39-yard field goal with no time remaining as Notre Dame nails down a 27-24 victory over the Longhorns of Texas. Horns down that day in Austin.
Down. Was that a thing yet by then?
No, it was not. It was not a thing. That Jim Sanson's field goal set up, ironically, by a 11-yard pass from Ron Paulus to Malcolm Johnson on that final drive. Ricky Williams, the eventual Heisman Trophy winner, he runs for 107 yards on 17 carries and a touchdown. Sanson's field goal with no time remaining on the clock was the first game-winning field goal for Notre Dame since 1986 when John Carney hits a 19-yard field goal. All three of us could hit a 19-yard field goal.
He's from my high school, Cardinal Newman.
Look at
we'll
that.
have no negativity toward Carney.
John Carney, great guy. I did a couple stories with
Fine
John
kicker,
Carney.
yeah.
19-yard field goal. His 19-yard field goal with no time remaining beat USC 38-37. So
You know what I was doing on September 21st, 1996, Jackson? Do you know?
I do not know.
I'm pretty sure because I just had to look it up, and this is how long ago that was. I'm pretty sure. I'm only pretty sure that I covered the first win as the Georgia football coach for Jim Donnan. They defeated Texas Tech. This was well before Mike Leach got there. But
between the hedges or in Lubbock?
15-12 between the hedges. I would remember if it was a road game. I would remember that. But I'd have to look to see who Georgia Tech, Clemson, and South Carolina all played that day to give you a definitive answer. I had not. I could have been aware, but I was unaware of what Pot of Gold's date was. Pot of Old, and I think this is a fun little offshoot that I'm going to force into it each week now. Where the heck was Mike? What was he covering that day? Because it's been a while.
Yeah.
There you go. That's our Pot of Old. We'll come back with our guest spotlight. We'll be talking to Mark O. Hubbard, who has a new book out on era
Parsegian.
Parsegian.
Like the middle syllables like Seagrams, they say, and then
Of course.
Ian. Yeah.
All right. We'll talk right after this. Back on the Pot of Gold here for the heading into the Miami of Ohio game against Notre Dame, and we are joined by Mark O. Hubbard. He is the author of Era, The Life and Legacy of a Notre Dame Legend, the authorized biography of one Era Parsegian. Mark, great for you to be here. You have nothing better to do on this glorious South Bend afternoon than to come sit in a podcast studio and talk about Era Parsegian.
Well, thank you for inviting me, first of all. And secondly, there's probably no higher cause that I could be on this afternoon than to be here talking about such an extraordinary guy. And I think there's a lot to be said about him, and hopefully we'll get into some of that right now.
What's the biggest challenge of writing a book about an individual that you consider a friend in Era?
It was difficult in a couple of ways, but then easier in some ways. When I got to know Era, obviously, from the previous two books that I wrote, and we became very good friends, and I was able to spend a lot of personal time with him and took mental notes, and when I was asking him questions and so forth, very casual, and it was great. After he passed, Katie came to me and said she'd like to have the biography written, and she said, I'd like to have you do it because you knew him, and she thought I would do a good job because they had been very appreciative of the previous two books that I'd written about Notre Dame football. So it's hard to write about a friend and about somebody you know very, very well. On the other hand, I was able to get a lot of information through my personal relationship with him that was included in the book, and I wouldn't have been selected had Katie not trusted me to do a good job. And then what I didn't know was that Era had such a robust set of files waiting for me to uncover a lot of the information that would help me fill in the gaps in the book. So I was very lucky in that regard that he was really a saver of the written word, did a lot of writing himself, letters and essays and so forth. And so I was given kind of a treasure trove of materials to start from, and I think we put it together in a very coherent way. And I think at the end of the day, I think we really kind of got the real measure of the man. And I don't know if you were aware of this, but the Wall Street Journal did a review of the book, which is very unusual, and they were exceedingly generous in the review. And so it's the reaction has been very, very good to the book, which only came out on August 1st.
And how many pages is it?
384, I think. That includes the index and a couple other things.
It's 384, but there's so much there that it could be 584. How do you go about scaling it down and saying, this has to be in here, this has to be in here, and I would love for this to be in here, but I got to take it out?
Well, that was really one of the challenges. I'd never written a biography before. I'd written about college football, obviously. And a biography is a very different animal. And so I had to come up with what I thought was a game plan. And the coach would have been really happy that I came to that conclusion early on. And I decided that the book was going to be about personality and character. Obviously, football was going to be a part of it. But, Era stopped coaching when he was 51 years old. He lived until he was 94. There's a lot of other life that he had that needed to be recorded in some fashion. So football is a big piece of this, obviously, around Notre Dame. Everybody remembers the 11 years of Era. But I focused on personality and character, and then that made writing the book somewhat easier because I could eliminate certain things that really didn't reinforce that particular view of the book. And the reaction has been actually pretty good to that being the kind of the focus.
Talking with Mark O. Hubbard, and that's O period, not O apostrophe.
I married an Irish girl, but I'm not Irish.
Have to remind the folks that it rolls right off the tongue. Mark O. Hubbard.
Yeah.
But
I'm not the golfer. I put the O in there so that people didn't think I was the golfer.
There you go.
The O is not for Orenthal, right?
Owen, it's for Owen.
Okay,
yeah.
very all right. Speaking of which, so many different mispronunciations of the last name, this name that lives on forever.
Right.
How many different ones have you counted over the years? And for once and for all, just say it the way Era wanted it said.
Well, the way you would say it is Parsegian, okay? And the derivation of that is that his father basically came over to America during the Armenian Holocaust, and he was the son of Parseg. So Parsegian is the son of Parseg. That's what it translates to in Armenian. And so Parsegian is not an uncommon name here in America, but virtually nobody is related to each other because they would all be sons of Parseg, and Parseg was a first name that was common in Armenia in the 1880s to 1920s.
So did it bother him, or does it bother the family members at all that it's still kind of like people just kind of choose whatever they're feeling that day?
I've heard Parsegian, I've heard Parsegan, I've heard all sorts of variations of this. And you know what? He was not a snob around that. He just really liked the idea that people knew him, respected him, and of course at Notre Dame we all loved him,
And you talk about the basically multiple, almost half a life in football or football coaching, and then a second half where, community-based fundraising, medically-based television. Yeah. He was excellent. I remember ABC and CBS.
Exactly.
Could have stayed in that and been, John Madden if he wanted the whole time. How much? Let's talk about that. I mean, what's something that people should know about the TV portion? And was he? Because I remember him being willing to criticize, but you always knew that he had been a coach.
Yeah, he left coaching after the 1974 season and took a year off. He didn't do anything related to football. He wanted to have a kind of a cleansing year, which he honored. And then he was approached by ABC, Chuck Howard, to be the color guy in the booth with Keith Jackson, who was also a personal friend of mine. And they did a number of years together there, and they became kind of the number one crew on ABC when ABC had the exclusive NCAA contract for college football. Back, and I don't know what year it is, I could look it up, but the NCAA then made two networks have it. CBS had it, and CBS made a run at Era, and he decided to move to work with Brent Musburger in CBS. And so the breadth of his career was probably 10 or 11, 12 years. It was a long time on the air as the color commentator for the primary games in college football in those days.
What did you learn about Era in doing this book with him?
Well, I knew a lot about it beforehand, but the thing that impressed me as I was doing the book, you can say a lot of things about his intelligence, which was very, very intelligent. You could say that, very instinctive about human nature. He was extraordinarily, wanted integrity in all things, honesty and so forth. All those things are great qualities. But his personal courage was the thing that kind of came through to me. To leave college coaching, when you're 51 years old, and there were a lot of reasons for it. I think it took a lot of courage because, to be in the media and to be well known in America and you have your name be so recognized and playing golf with celebrities and presidents and so forth, it's addictive, and it's hard to walk away from that, I think. And the fact that he did it because he knew that the stress was getting to be too much and it was going to affect his personality, his family life, the people that he cared about, and he made that difficult decision. And so I think courage was the thing that I saw as I was starting to do this book. More and more it came through, and almost everything he said or did or wrote, that you would see elements of that, and that would be the thing that I would say jumped forward for me.
You were a student at Notre Dame while he was coaching?
Yes, I came here as a student in 1967. The national championship had been won in 1966, and fortunately for me, I wrote the book about the 1966 national champions and was named an honorary member of the team, and I have
Yes,
a
you
ring
do.
to
A
prove
ring.
it right
Look at
here,
that.
which is one of the great treasures of my life. But what you couldn't capture coming off of a national championship year was the enthusiasm that was here on campus. It was all male, first of all, so there were a lot of guys that played high school football. Everybody was talking about football. Nobody had dates at St. Mary's because there was only one girl over there for every 7 guys. So we were really just kind of swept up in this 1967 season, which was a good season, but it was a little disappointing because it didn't go the way everybody thought it was going to go. We thought we might have another chance at another national championship, but we lost some very good players. But it was a kind of emotion and a kind of feeling on campus that I don't think exists today, but it was really magical when it happened.
Mark, when a coach of that magnitude, Hall of Fame coach, retires at 51 and then is around the game as a broadcaster, meeting with other coaches, athletic directors, there had to be some moments where he was tempted to come back and coach again. He was on the board of trustees, as you mentioned, at his alma mater, Miami of Ohio, this week's opponent, for 9 years. Was there ever a single moment where what was the closest call where he might have come back or even in some sort of GM role?
Well, we talked about that, and his answer to me, of course, now he was in his late 80s, early 90s, and he could reflect back. He said, I always appreciated the college game. I grew up in the college game. I got my opportunities in the college game. And he was really adamant about attaching the student and the athlete together as part of the package. He really was intent on keeping that relationship together. I think we're losing it now, but so I think he liked the college environment. He liked raising his family in the college environment. So after he left, a couple of things kind of bubbled up that I didn't see happening. One is it wasn't his last game coaching at Notre Dame. He actually coached for a half at an All-Star game in 1976, I think it was. The game was canceled after
That's right, that lightning storm.
A lightning storm in Chicago. And he never really wanted to go back to coaching after that. In the 1970 era, and this was in the files, and it's mentioned in the book prominently, there was a contract from the Miami Dolphins, a complete NFL contract. I'm talking about 10 pages, all the boilerplate. All it needed was a signature and a stamp, and he could have left to become the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Mm-hmm. And
what year?
I can look it up, but it's around 1970. And
before Don Shula comes down.
The same year that Don Shula was hired. In fact, there's a funny story there, which I'll tell in a minute. And the file with this contract was left there untouched. And obviously, nothing ever happened about it. And so, anyway, years later, Don Shula, this is Katie telling me the story, came to Era and said, I've always wondered, Era, was I the first choice or did they contact you first? And Era, the gracious guy that he was a wonderfully gracious guy, said, no, that never happened. And so they maintained friendship forever and ever. They're 2 Hall of Fame coaches. Shula went on to be the winningest coach in the NFL. And I think it's a great story about both guys. I mean, Era was just really a gracious person. Didn't want to blow the bubble around Shula, thinking he might have been number 2 on the list.
They're still talking about it upstairs now.
Oh, I'm sure. Playing some golf too, I imagine.
The idea that there were close calls even before he had got to Notre Dame. Tell us the quick version of the story in terms of he had 2 press conferences when he was hired at Notre Dame, right? Or he was in town at least for the first one.
Yeah.
He's the Northwestern coach, great demand,
Right.
and something doesn't go exactly to the finish line, and he's headed to the Sunshine State at one point. What's that story? How close did that come to University of Miami or Florida at that time?
Well, the Miami thing was actually before the press conferences. After Thanksgiving of 1963, Notre Dame still hadn't picked a head coach. And his brother said to him, why don't you let Father Joyce know that you'd be interested in the job? And so he made a call to Father Joyce here at Notre Dame, and Father Joyce was very appreciative of the call and said he'd get back to him. And he did. But in the intervening week, he had a scheduled meeting at Miami of Florida because the head coach had left. And he was on his way to Florida and said to Katie, I'm going to call in from the airport. There was an intermediate stop in St. Louis. And if they call, let me know. He called in. Katie said, Father Joyce has called back. He said, I'm going to cancel the flight to Florida, and I'm going to come back to South Bend. Not to South Bend, but to Chicago. And that's what he did. And of course, it progressed from there. He met with Father Joyce and Father Hesburgh. And he was, I think, the obvious choice if you look back in history, but maybe not so obvious at the time. 4 victories against Notre Dame kind of helped make the case. But once they kind of agreed on that they were going to go forward and he was going to be the head coach, it was kind of a secret. Joe Doyle here in town kind of broke the story, probably more on speculation than anything else.
Oh, Joe had it. He was Joe Doyle was the former sports editor of the South Bend Tribune.
Exactly right.
The Tribune had it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Joe, of course, was a good friend of mine, and part of the reason why I write books is because Joe encouraged me to do it. So Eric came in on a Sunday evening and met with Father Joyce over at the Morris Inn, and we're working on things. And then Eric that night, and he describes this, by the way, in his own words. I'm not making this up. This is the authentic account of what happened. He came to the conclusion that maybe he wasn't right for the job because he had been raised a Catholic. Most people don't realize this. They think of him as an Armenian Presbyterian, and the truth is he was just as much a French Catholic. His mother raised him in the Catholic Church. He had baptism, First Communion, confirmation, and until he went into the Navy was a participant in the Catholic Church in Akron. And so he viewed himself as a fallen away Catholic, and he thought maybe that would not go down well with the alumni base and with the people at Notre Dame, and he was afraid that he didn't want to make that be an issue if he took the head coaching job. So he overnight thought about it and said, well, I'm not going to go do the press conference on the Monday morning. They gave a bunch of excuses about why it hadn't happened. Maybe they hadn't worked out the details and so forth. But at the end of the day, that Monday, he was on the phone and he accepted the job after Father Hesburgh, Father Joyce, and Moose Krause convinced him that his status as a fallen away Catholic wouldn't discount him from being a good coach, and they wanted the best possible guy for the job. And, you know, I look back on it and I think that honesty probably really impressed the administration here, that the guy was that concerned about that kind of issue. And they got the guy, they got the right guy, and obviously we're so blessed here at Notre Dame to have had him here for 11 years.
Given your personal relationship with Era, with his wife, with his family, did you feel like you had to write this book? Like this was a personal goal of yours to get this thing done, to see it through, to finish the final chapter and get it published?
Well, that's kind of funny because I would visit Era at his home. Sometimes I would call ahead, sometimes I wouldn't. But every time I was there, after we got to know each other, I'd say, Coach, when are we going to start on your biography? And he'd look at me and give me that eye, that look. He had a look. He said, no, we're not going to do it. I don't want to do it. It's too much work. I'm not worthy of it. He was a very humble guy, actually. And so forever and ever, that was our joke. Every time I left his home, I would say, when are we going to start on the biography? Mm-hmm. Well, the last time I visited him was in May of the year he passed, 2017. And I brought along with me a student of mine that got a PhD in sports psychology, and she actually worked here at Notre Dame, Amber Selking, mm-hmm. you may know. And Amber and I went out there unannounced, and we sat down and we were talking to Katie and Era over the dining room table, and had a nice afternoon visit. And at the end, I said, well, Coach, when are we going to start on the biography? He said, we're not going to do that. He said, I don't want to do that. I think he was just now annoyed at me keeping asking the question. And then Amber, to her credit, I have to tell you, this really helped the book. She said, now, Coach, if there were to be a biography written about you, what should the title be? And he looked at all of us and he smiled. He said, how about ERA, A-R-A? It reads the
Original.
same forwards and backwards. That was his. So he actually titled the book. And for that, it was wonderful because we didn't have to go looking for a title. He gave the book his own title. And that's how it started. Now, that was, 2 years later when Katie called me and said she'd like me to start doing this. Now, that's when the enormity of the task kind of hit me. And so Rocky Blyer called me and he said, Mark, you have a momentous task in front of you. And he was right. It took 5 years and a lot of time and effort, but I think it was worth it. I think we came with a really quality biography, and I think people will get to know somebody who's so key to the history of Notre Dame in a much better way through the work that we were able to put together here.
How do you know when you're done? Like you said, it took 5 years where you put the period on it, and you're like, that's it, I'm not going back to this.
Well, I'll tell you.
Volume 2.
Well,
Yes.
you know you're done when the editors edit your book and they take out the things that they don't want to see in there, or they want to limit your pages or your photographs, which getting permissions was really one of the harder things to do in this book, as you guys are well aware, getting photographic permission and quotes and so forth. But I think the kind of the cherry on the top when I knew I was done was when I finished the index. That's like a self-imposed colonoscopy for a writer.
Nice.
So the index is done, and now the book was done, and I could relax. And I get to do things like this, which I enjoy very much.
What are some of the coaching innovations? And obviously, fertile mind, a great offensive mind. What were the innovations that maybe have persisted to this day, or maybe have fallen away, but he was the first?
Well, I'm not sure he was the first in anything, but he did them a lot better than most people. For example, he had coaching cards in his back pocket and almost a game plan based on various situations, and he would use it in his back pocket. And it would fit, and it was these cards that were maybe 4 inches by 8 inches would fit in his back pocket. So they had really a good sense of what to do in situational football written down. This is before computers and so forth. But then he had a very unique way of communicating with the team on the field. Most people don't realize that, until 1964, we had single platoon football. We didn't have two platoon football. And so Aaron knew the offense and the defense because he had to play both ways. And he would tell me, he said, Mark, defense is much harder to play than offense. He said, when you're on offense, you want to keep the ball as long as you can because you don't want to play defense. And so he said that affects the way you call the game and the way you play the game. And I think that actually is interesting if you think about how games go today. He was able to then state, and I got this out of the book about Alan Page, his first meeting with the team, he said, football is a simple game. It's about possession and position. He said, if you think of errors, moves on the field with regard to possession and position, almost everything makes sense. And he had this computer-like mind that was able to deal with all of this. So his signals from the sideline, in those days, it was illegal for the coach to send in signals from the sideline. So he devised his own little code, which nobody really figured out while he was coach, but it involved all natural gestures. And you think about it, it would take enormous control to do this well, because he would put his clipboard over a part of his chest, either the Notre or the Dame, or it would be one side of the clipboard or the other, or he would kneel or he would stand. All those would be signals to the quarterback or the defensive captain, but none of them were so obvious that the referees would call a penalty on him. And he demonstrated this to me when he was in his 80s. He still knew how to do it. He stood up in his office and showed me exactly how he did it. And after I wrote the book, Undisputed, we talked a lot. He said, Mark, you got that right. He said, that was the one part of the book, he said, nobody's ever seen before, but you really hit that just exactly right, how we did it at the time.
For listeners that want to get a copy of the book, that want to find out about the book, where do they go?
Well, the book is done very, very well. Since August 1st, For 1 month, we've sold over 1,000 copies. Wow. So, most books that are printed never get to 1,000 copies. Only 5% of the books in print sell 1,000 copies. It's available, obviously, at the Notre Dame bookstore, and I believe locally at Barnes & Noble here. You can order it online with Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and you can get it directly from the Notre Dame Press if you'd like. They'll taking orders there as well. And I get to do book signings, which is great because I get to meet the public and talk to people. And obviously this has been a labor of love, but it's not all easy. You guys do writing for a living. People don't realize how hard it is to write every day. And, my English grammar and syntax and so forth isn't that great. Luckily, I had a good copy editor that cleaned all that stuff up. But it's just been an interesting project from start to finish for me, and I'm delighted to share it. I think it's a very important historical book for Notre Dame as well.
That is Mark O. Hubbard. He is the author of the new book, Era, The Life and Legacy of a Notre Dame Legend, the authorized biography of Era Parsegian. Get your
son of Parseg.
Copies at Barnes & Noble. He'll be at the Notre Dame bookstore this weekend.
I'll be there on Friday from 3 to 5. And then I'm doing another book signing later in the season, I think, for the Stanford game.
There you go. So maybe we'll have you back on during the Stanford
I'd love
week.
to do that.
That is our guest spotlight. We'll come back. We'll wrap up this Pot of Gold segment with Speak Up and our Pot of Bold, where we will predict Saturday's game. So we'll be back after this. Take it from Irish Mike from Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Oh, that one.
Although he does say, hi, Eric. We're going to have to work on that a little bit. Eric hasn't been here in a while. So
Irish Mike, allow that?
Irish Mike a little ahead of time. Yeah, because every other question that I get is from guests. We're not going to just have some rando question. If somebody doesn't attach their name in their hometown.
Where are your friends in this? Why you're one of those young people with all these friends? Why don't they ask questions of you?
Right now, I just get a lot of emails that say that Angeli should be the starter.
Oh, that's kind of a state question.
It's not really it's not really a question. It's just more of a statement.
Speaking of which, after watching, now listen carefully.
Irish Mike on the
You tend to drift when I have these questions.
I do.
After watching Steve Angeli for half of the Purdue game, do you think if he would have subbed in for Riley Leonard when Riley Leonard was injured against Northern Illinois, Notre Dame would have won that game? Gentlemen.
Give me the tough one.
Yeah, that's the only one of the week.
I'm still gonna go with no on that one. I don't know. While he does, we did see some great things against Purdue, but I think we have to kind of couch that with the fact that this was second half. They're up by, how many touchdowns was that? 6 touchdowns against probably the worst team in the Big Ten. I think that would have. Leonard did not look great against NIU, but I think there was more things wrong with Notre Dame that day than just Leonard.
Right. Defensively, they had issues. Offensively, they had issues. Going against a defense a defense that was rolling in Northern Illinois, maybe Steve Angeli struggles. Like, you got to remember, we talked about how bad Purdue is. Steve Angeli drops back, and a guy comes from basically Kokomo and sacks Steve Angeli as he's seeing him, like he sees him coming from Kokomo all the way. You got to move your feet or get rid of the ball, but you just can't let a guy get a 15-yard head start on you and sack you the way he was sacked. So yeah, he threw a couple of touchdown passes. He played well, but there were some issues there with Steve Angeli, and all indications were Steve Angeli did not have the greatest week of practice heading into the Purdue game, which allowed Notre Dame to go with Riley Leonard maybe a little more easier than what if Angeli lit it up in practice, maybe there'd be a decision. There was no decision. I don't think it was just it was just a quarterback thing for Notre Dame against Northern Illinois. Their issues ran deeper than just what Riley Leonard could or could not do. So I'd still say team thing against Northern Illinois. Didn't matter who the quarterback was. They just weren't mentally prepared to handle what they had to handle in playing Northern Illinois.
Do you want an answer? Should I answer?
Absolutely. We want an answer.
First, I have two answers. First one is
Make 'em quick.
hypothetical. That was hypothetical. We don't answer hypotheticals. Next question. But then if I cycle, it's hypothetical. But if I cycle back to something I have said and I'll stand by, I said it right here at this table. Everyone will remember this. Steve Angeli, before the year, I said he could get you to the college football playoff.
Yes, you did.
I said that. I believe he's good enough to get you to the college football playoff, and that might allow 2 losses. But if you really want to win the whole thing, you need to plug in to Riley Leonard's athletic ability and have him hit all cylinders as a passer, max out Riley Leonard, because the ceiling is clearly higher. It's not the right now. The current is they're different pieces. They're interchangeable. And if Notre Dame were to, next time Notre Dame's down by 2 touchdowns at halftime, it's going to be an interesting moment. But perhaps they don't experience that all year until the playoff. Who knows? But Angeli struck me as a guy who can get you there. But if you want to get there and win it, you need to give Leonard the entirety of the year to develop. And this is a 1-year development program. It's Jaden Daniels' experience, but compressed in 2 years to 1. And Denbrock is operating under those circumstances, and it's a work in progress.
Let's wrap this bad boy up. Give me some pot of bold, Jackson. Easiest segment of the show. Give me 1 hot take and 1 score prediction. Jackson Neal, we start with you.
My hot take, Jaden Greathouse catches Riley Leonard's first touchdown pass of the season this week. And then my score prediction, 34-10 Notre Dame.
There you go. Mike and Berardino, are you set, or you want me to go first?
You go.
James Rendell will have a 75-yard punt.
Whoa! That's crazy.
A conventional punt or an Aussie roll?
It's gonna like spin sideways. I don't know what we're gonna see, but all the angst about the punter. 75-yard punt, and Jackson stole my score. I predicted 34-10 in the newspaper. I said my reasoning was we have seen a different Notre Dame team each of the first 3 weeks this season. That's not going to change. I'll also go 34-10.
This is Cleats for a Cause week, and I think that's a cool thing that Notre Dame does, and Under Armour with it. And so 5 local charities will be nonprofits will benefit from that, and then subsequently there'll be. So I'll just say that my hot take is that when they do come out with those auctions, and it's all online. It's fun. The shoe sizes and the amount that the auction is at on live auction. I encourage everyone to go out there and do that. Great causes. I'll bet Kingston Viliamu Asa.
Easy for you to say.
KVA. Kingston Viliamu Asa will draw the highest bid on any of the types of shoes, the slip-ons or the cleats, whatever, because the just based on the way things that we mention about him on Twitter get retweeted and liked, there's a great passion and support for this freshman who just got here and has a huge future ahead of him. And the final score will be the same score that I predicted the last time Notre Dame played a MAC team, 41-6. I'm sticking with that, 41-6. It should have been that way last time. This time, why overthink it?
We'll see. That's the pot of gold for this week. Mike Berardino, Jackson Neal, I'm Tom Noy. We'll be back next week to recap Miami of Ohio and preview Louisville right here. Enjoy your week. This has been Pot of Gold.
This has been the South Bend Tribune's Pot of Gold podcast, your home for insightful Notre Dame football coverage and analysis.